After weeks without progress, we are starting to see signs of movement from Congress on providing aid for the country during this pandemic, just as the few remaining provisions from the prior package are set to expire. As we mentioned at the top of the hour, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin spoke about a potential stimulus today for the first time since October. As those talks restart once again, a bipartisan group from the House and Senate are proposing a $900 billion relief plan. It includes small business relief, additional unemployment insurance, and funding for state, local, and tribal governments. What it does not include, another round of stimulus checks that many received in the spring. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has largely brushed off that bipartisan proposal, instead putting together his own plan he thinks has the best chance of getting President Trump's signature.
We just don't have time to waste time. We have a couple of weeks left here. Obviously, it does require bipartisan support to get out of the Congress, but it requires a presidential signature. And this government is in place for sure for the next month. And I think the place to start is, are we actually making a law, or are we just making a point?
For more, I'm joined by Nancy Cordes and Heather Long. Nancy is CBS News Chief Congressional Correspondent, and Heather is an economics correspondent for The Washington Post. Welcome. It's good to see you both. So, Nancy, you obtained a summary of Mitch McConnell's stimulus proposal. What's in it, and how does it compare to what President Trump has indicated he'll sign?
Well, it looks very similar, Elaine, to the bill that McConnell has tried to pass a couple of times already now in the Senate that has gotten a big thumbs down from Democrats because they don't believe that it is big enough. His plan in the past was about $500 billion. He has added a little bit more money to extend unemployment insurance for another month or so, but it doesn't include any funding for state and local governments. It doesn't include any stimulus checks, and it does include, this is something that's important to both parties, more money for small businesses, for restaurants, to help them weather this very difficult economic period. It is hard to see why Leader McConnell thinks that this plan will have a better shot at getting presidential approval than the larger package that was introduced by that bipartisan group today. I mean, after all, this is a president who had said he wanted to go big, that he was supporting a $1.8 trillion relief package before the election. This McConnell package, we don't have the final figure, but it's probably about $500 or $600 billion, pretty small compared to some of the other plans that are floating around. But the problem now is, Elaine, that we do have multiple proposals here from McConnell, from Democrats. There are talks taking place, and we've got only about a week or a week and a half to go before Congress wants to get out of town for the holiday recess. So if they are going to come to some sort of agreement, it's going to have to happen very quickly.
And Heather, we see three different price tags on the three proposals from Senate Republicans, this bipartisan group, and from House Democrats. So beyond cost, Nancy touched on this a moment ago, but what are some of the glaring differences when you look at these proposals?
Well, one of the biggest ones is, how do you help the unemployed? So this latest proposal from Mitch McConnell does not include any additional money for unemployed. So remember, they got that extra $600 in the spring and summer, and then they got about a month of $300 extra in September. This would include $0 extra dollars for unemployed. Many people right now, as you and I have spoken about, are surviving on unemployment checks that are $150 to $250 a week, and they are desperately hoping for more money to pay their rent and their utilities and pay for food through the winter. So I think the other thing that's not in there that's going to be a real sticking point between Republicans and Democrats is money for things like transportation and state and local. There was a shock announcement last night from Washington, D.C. Metro that they would end weekend service potentially next year or the following year because they're running out of money, and that they would have to cut about 3,800 jobs. We're expecting similar announcements from New York, from Boston, from other cities that are hemorrhaging money right now as they try to fight this pandemic and don't even have enough money to keep their public transportation, their subway systems going.
There continues to just be more bad news upon bad news. Well, Nancy, you are there on Capitol Hill. You have followed the ins and outs of these negotiations from the start. What is your sense on a deal actually being made before lawmakers leave again in a few weeks?
My sense, Elaine, unfortunately for the millions of Americans who are hoping that Congress will act, is that it's fairly unlikely. There's just too large of a gap right now between what Republicans want and what Democrats want, and it's too uncertain who really has the upper hand here, because we've got these two Senate runoffs in Georgia now coming in just about a month, and they could determine the balance of power in the Senate. If Democrats do take control of the Senate, then suddenly they'll have a lot more power to push through the package that they want. And so, you have some Democrats who feel that perhaps they should just hold out. And then you've got some more moderate Democrats and Republicans who want to cut a deal. And then you've got Republicans who are arguing, no way, no how. We don't even want to spend any money on additional stimulus. We see the light at the end of the tunnel. There's a vaccine coming and things will get a lot better soon. So, you've just got this huge dichotomy here in Congress about what should be done, and you have a president who really isn't all that engaged in the talks. He wasn't that engaged before the election. He certainly isn't now. He's kind of deputized his Treasury Secretary and his Chief of Staff to talk with Leader McConnell and Speaker Pelosi, but we don't see the consistent high-level talks between McConnell and Pelosi that you would expect to see if they were really working on a deal that they thought could get through both houses of Congress before they go home this month.
So against that backdrop of this dichotomy in Congress, Heather, you have had a lot of extensive reporting looking at the real world effects. And when we look at the list of aid programs that are expiring this month, unemployment for gig workers, eviction protections, a student loan payment freeze, what is the impact going to be if a deal cannot be reached soon? Because for so many of the families and the people that I know that you have spoken with, if they are hanging on at all, it is not in any kind of sustainable way right now.
You're absolutely right, Elaine. I was on the phone with a family from Nashville, Tennessee yesterday, and the woman lost her job. She thought she had gotten another job finally in November, and then as COVID cases spiked, she was told, sorry, we don't need you anymore. We're trying to limit people coming into the office again. And so she's still out of work. And their family has an eviction hearing scheduled for January 5th. Right after that moratorium that you just flashed up expires at the end of the year. So this is getting very, very real for people. She was crying on the phone, and it's hard to know what to tell people, what to keep hoping for. Nancy gave a great rundown of where things stand with Congress. The one thing that could really change this is this Friday we will get the latest jobs report, Friday morning for November. If that is a negative number, that's going to potentially change the game. Republicans keep saying that the recovery is on track, the economy is improving, but if we see job losses in November and again in December, which people are warning of, I think that's going to be really hard to deny that we're not seeing rising pain again.
Yeah, we'll be watching for that very closely. All right, Nancy Cordes and Heather Long, thank you both very much.